All right, everybody. Sunday, December 7th, Pearl Harbor Day, 6:37, Charlotte, North Carolina. Bill Mitchell with the Sons of Saturday. And we are going to talk about Brent Pry coming back to Virginia Tech to be the defensive coordinator for the Hokies. Now, before we do that, I do want to talk about a couple of Hokie headlines. What we're looking to do here at Sons of Saturday is we're kicking around the idea, how are we going to approach this offseason? What are we going to talk about? How are we going to talk about it? I think it would be really cool to do some sort of version of a Sons of Saturday six-pack. You're tying into the Too Deep thing. And, I'd love the idea of bringing 6 topics every single Sunday. Talk with Pete, talk with Sam, talk with Pat, talk with Ed, talk with Rob, talk with anybody, kind of PTI style. So I'm still marinating on that. But if you have some topics that you would like to hear us discuss, whether they're Virginia Tech related or college football related, please drop them down in the comments. And also, before we get started, if you can, it does help. It truly does. Please hit the subscribe button and hit the like button. I would really, really, really appreciate it. It is the season of giving. Give us a like. Give us a subscribe. It does help. So, quick headlines. Duke beat UVA to win the ACC championship. They won 27-20. Objectively, hilarious. Don't want to take anything away from UVA. They had a tremendous season, but it does end in Charlotte, barring whatever bowl game they're going to. Neither of those teams are going to the college football playoff because the ACC put themselves in this position. That's going to be one of the topics on the first six-pack. Is I think I have an idea of something that the ACC should do moving into next year. But Miami will represent the ACC in the college football playoffs. So we do have that going for us. What else do we have going on? The girls lost to Duke today. That was ugly. The men won a basketball game. And if you're looking for some analysis on the college football playoff, immediately College Football Monday will be coming out on Monday, tomorrow, the 8th. So make sure to tune in there. Now, Coach Pry coming back to be the defensive coordinator of Virginia Tech. Let me say this, because I have gotten the state-run media and I have gotten the always erring on the side of supporting the program stuff before. And I do just want to set this straight going into this year. As it pertains to James Franklin and his tenure at Virginia Tech, it would be silly of me to talk about how great a job he has done in building programs and how much I believe in his ability to be successful here at Virginia Tech, and then to also pick and choose which one of those moves I like early in his tenure. So I'm speaking for myself. I'm not telling you how to think, or if you're not a Virginia Tech fan, how you should analyze this looking from the outside in. But I have a great deal of trust in James Franklin and any decision that he makes for the first 18 to 24 months of his tenure. And that pertains to filling out the staff. And we all know how important that is. And, obviously a big reason that I feel that way is his success that he has had at Penn State, at Vanderbilt, and, what I think he brings to Virginia Tech. The flip side of that is when you make a decision like this to bring back Brent Pry. For those of you who live under a rock, Brent Pry was the head coach of Virginia Tech, who has been fired and now has been rehired to be the defensive coordinator. It's a little bit odd. It's a little bit unprecedented. However, 2 things. On James Franklin's side, James Franklin is in a position where he has something to prove. And this is a big opportunity for him, whether he wants to be at Virginia Tech for a long period of time or he wants to build Virginia Tech back up and then put himself in a position to take a larger job, of which there are some out there. I think he's going to put his best foot forward. And I think, if you label this as he's just looking out for his boy or he's just, kind of mailing this in, I don't think that James Franklin's a mail it in type of guy. And if he has enough trust in Coach Brent Pry to bring him back on and head up this defense, I'm going to trust it. And that's just kind of how I'm looking at it. Now let's flip it over to Coach Pry's perspective. What do I know about Coach Pry? The person. I know that every parent and every coach and every player that I have spoken to, whether they interacted with Coach Pry at Virginia Tech or at Penn State, even spoken to some that were interacting with him at Vanderbilt, they have all said that he is a tremendous individual He's a great guy. He's a player's coach. He's a hell of a defensive mind. Okay. And when you're looking at somebody to be a defensive coordinator, I really don't care how good of a head coach he was. I just don't. Another thing I know about Coach Pry is that he cares tremendously about Virginia Tech. Not only does he have the respect of Coach Franklin, they're obviously linked at the hip and they've known each other for a long time, but he has the respect of the high school coaches across the state of Virginia because he's rebuilt those relationships. He has the respect of the donors at Virginia Tech. The conversations that I've had, whether it be with members of the BOV, donors of the athletic programs at Virginia Tech, every one of them is upset that it didn't work out right, but nobody has any problems with Brent Pry, the human being. I've always said this ever since Coach Fuente went his separate way. And anytime that we've departed from a coach or a player, don't hate the person, hate the results. And obviously the results for him as a head coach did not work out, but that has no bearing on his ability to be a really effective defensive coordinator. Now, before we get into his resume as a defensive coordinator, I just want to say this. This was always a possibility. When James Franklin took the stage at his introductory press conference and got choked up when talking about Coach Pry, for me, it went from a possibility to a probability. There is obviously a great deal of respect for Coach Franklin to Coach Pry. They've known each other forever. That story has been really detailed. And I kind of accepted and liked the fact that Brent Pry could be involved in this staff. I knew that it was going to take a lot of putting your ego to the side. For ego is probably the wrong word, but that is a very interesting position to where you could be feeling bad for yourself. You wanted to move on. And we've talked about how Coach Pry put his ego aside to talk about Virginia Tech in a positive light when James Franklin was considering the job. This is putting your ego aside to basically, I'm going to go back to what I'm good at. I'm going to stay at the place that just fired me, and I'm going to work with the person who I am very familiar with. So ultimately, again, so much respect for Coach Pry and how he's handled this. And it obviously shows how much respect Coach Franklin has for him as a former peer. Now, let's talk about Coach Pry as a defensive coordinator. At first, when I thought he was going to be involved, it was like, okay, maybe he'll be an analyst. Maybe he'll be, I don't know what his role will be, but defensive coordinator was certainly not my first thought. And I think the knee-jerk reaction for a lot of people is, okay, like, how should we feel about this? And again, I've just kind of been trusting James Franklin as he builds this staff. You know, we'll get a name for offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, linebacker coach, special teams coach. And ultimately, I'm like, hey, I trust him to put together the right staff. If you were asking me a week ago, you know, would Brent Pry be your first pick for defensive coordinator? I think it's kind of unfair to be like yes or no, because one, I don't know what the options are, and two, I'm not as in the weeds with it because, again, he's assembling a staff. Now, let's talk about Brent Pry, the defensive coordinator. So Brent Pry has been coaching in college football for 34 years. Here is what his rankings were as the defensive coordinator at Penn State in points given up per year. In 2016, the Penn State unit was 47th. 2017, they were ranked 7th. 2018, 23rd. 2019, 8th. 2020, Mickey Mouse year COVID, 55th. And then 2021, 7th. So you're telling me in his 6-year stint, 6-year stint as a defensive coordinator, they were top 10 3 times. They were top 25 4 times. I'll tell you what, Brent Pry, and Bud Foster said this, is not a good defensive coordinator. He is a great defensive coordinator. Now, I just talked about a bunch of pros, right? Guy loves Virginia Tech. The players really like him. He and James Franklin are close. Look at all these top defenses. Let's talk about some of the cons. I think the biggest con and the fairest con is that this is just weird. You read the headline, people are texting you, people are reaching out, and you're looking inside and you're like, is this weird? Is this weird? It's weird, right? I don't think it really matters if it's weird to me or to you or to anybody. It really matters if it's weird to Brent Pry and James Franklin. If it's not weird for those two, I don't think that that's going to have any bearing on how effective Brent Pry will be as a defensive coordinator. Why is that? Again, every single player that I have spoken to post firing has a great deal of respect for Coach Pry, right? And we'll get into kind of how the season unfolded and some concerns there. But we've seen this. Like, can you imagine when James Franklin probably walked in to tell the team or whenever, hey guys, long search. We have our defensive coordinator. It's Brent Pry. Now, I don't know if that happened or whatnot. You also have to factor in, but that moment would have been pretty cool if it did. You also have to factor in there are going to be so many new players that are coming in. And so many of these new players are coming to Virginia Tech because they trust James Franklin. And if James Franklin is giving Brent Pry the stamp of approval as the defensive coordinator, I have no problem with it. So again, I'm not telling you that you shouldn't think that it's weird, that it isn't abnormal, that it isn't unprecedented, because largely it is unprecedented. I did do some research to find some similar situations, which we'll go over in a second. But that doesn't really matter to me as it pertains to, can he be a good defensive coordinator, because he's already checked that box. So if he's able to handle it professionally and James Franklin's able to handle it professionally, we have no problems. Now, what are some examples of similar situations? I can't find an exact similar situation where a sitting head coach was fired. They brought in their basically the person that person was brought up by in the coaching ranks and then joined that staff the next year. That newsflash doesn't happen very often. Now, here are a couple of examples of things that have happened before. So Brian Hartline, who was just hired at USF, he was the offensive coordinator at Ohio State in 2023. Brian Hartline stepped aside in 2024 when Brian Kelly took over that offensive coordinator role. They went on to win the national championship, and then Brian Hartline stepped back into that offensive coordinator role for this year. Ohio State's been pretty good. So that's a little bit of a weird situation. Another weird situation is Bobby Petrino. Bobby Petrino being the offensive coordinator at Arkansas this past season. Now, Arkansas wasn't an awesome team, okay? Ohio State was. But it's not the first time that like weird stuff has happened. I'm sure that there have been weird things going on in your office and everything else. And ultimately, you may work at a job where there's a weird dynamic or something else. And ultimately, it just comes down to, can the people that are in that situation be professional about it? And I trust their ability to do so. Again, these are two people in James Franklin and Brent Pry that have a ton to prove and have a chip on their shoulder. I don't think James Franklin is taking a risk, a perceived risk like this, if he doesn't believe it's going to work out. And I don't think Coach Pry is jumping back into coaching when he has all of that money coming in from the severance with Virginia Tech, unless he truly wants to, for Coach Franklin, for Virginia Tech. I'll also mention, I think if Brent Pry wanted to get a job as a defensive coordinator at another school, somebody else would have hired him as a defensive coordinator. I feel pretty confident in saying that. So I will mention that as well. Now, another con, and this one is pretty popular and it's fair, is this comes from Metropolitan Hokie. He wrote this one in the letters and lunch bell. Any concerns about the team seeming to quit on him this year? So that is a fair question. When you look at a results like the Vanderbilt game and you look at a results like the Old Dominion game, it's concerning, right? Now, it would be concerning if he was coming back to be the head coach of Virginia Tech, which he is not. I think, to be fair, I think a lot of people listening to this podcast, and in some regards, myself, have been put in a position where you recognize the Peter principle, right? And the Peter's principle basically states that you are elevated to a level of your incompetence. Now, incompetence is usually a word that is seems backhanded, but in this sense, I think of so many really, really, really good coaches, right? That are really, really, really good coordinators, or some really, really, really good coaches who are good at a certain level, and then they move up a level and they're not as good of a coach. Scott Frost had UCF rolling and then goes to Nebraska. Did he become like a worse coach, or did he forget how to coach, or was he really good at something very specific and then moved into something else and it didn't work out? Now, I'm not trying to say that Coach Pry can't go on and be a successful head coach later on in his career, but this move is taking somebody who's really good at something specific that we've seen him do it before and just simply asking him to do it again with the same basically manager in place that he was successful with previously. So that's what I kind of think happened here. It's a little bit of the Peter principle, right? And some other examples of this, of really good coaches who were elevated to a level, and then coaches who were coordinators who moved into being a head coach and then moved back into being a coordinator and were successful as if nothing happened. Josh McDaniels. Josh McDaniels was an awful head coach at multiple different stops. As an offensive coordinator, he's a multiple Super Bowl winning coordinator, and he's flip-flopped between the two. He's gone from being a coordinator to being a head coach to going back to being an awesome offensive coordinator again. Another example is Will Muschamp. Will Muschamp, awful at South Carolina. I saw Will Muschamp coach one football game as a head coach, and he happened to beat Georgia at Georgia. So, but other than that, really bad tenure at South Carolina. Then, after getting fired at South Carolina, he becomes the co-defensive coordinator for Georgia when they won the national championship in 2022. And then here's one where it kind of zags the Peter principle. It's Todd Bowles. Todd Bowles gets fired as the head coach of the New York Jets, goes back to being a defensive coordinator, wins a Super Bowl with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and now he's back with the Buccaneers as a head coach and is doing a pretty damn good job. So again, we've seen this so many times with Nick Saban when he was at Alabama, is bringing these coaches in to almost rehabilitate their career. And whether this means that Brent Pry goes back to being a really, really awesome defensive coordinator for the rest of his career, or if he takes a few years and learns a few lessons and puts himself in a position to get back into the head coaching ranks again, I mean, I think it's going to be to Virginia Tech's benefit, right? And I've also said this a bunch of times on this podcast. Just like players, just like students, just like employees, I think it's often overlooked that we think of head coaches as a finished product, right? So we think of Penn State thinks James Franklin is who he is. He can't win a big game. Ohio State fans, some of them, thought Ryan Day is incapable of winning a big game. And as you go through life, whether you're a coach, whether you're a plumber, whether you're a brain surgeon, whether you are just a son or daughter and kid trying to be a good son or daughter, right, to your parents, you learn, you evolve, you become better. You're not a finished product. So I think the lessons that both Coach Franklin and Coach Pry have learned over the last couple of years, if they take that and apply it, again, it's going to benefit Virginia Tech. So that's what I would say about the seeming to quit part. And again, we don't know what happened at halftime of the Vanderbilt game. We don't even know if anything did happen at halftime of the Vanderbilt game. But if it was something where some people have started this rumor that Coach Pry maybe got into an argument or a staffer got into an argument, there's also no validity to that, at least proven validity to that. It's just kind of people talking about it. There probably wouldn't be so many players that have so many positive things to say about Brent Pry. So I digress. That's kind of where I am. And as far as the pros go, again, his resume, he, like Franklin, has something to prove. And here's something that I don't think is being mentioned. There is a real tangible example of loyalty between James Franklin and Brent Pry. And in this era of transfer portal and, players going from school to school, commitments not meaning a lot, coaches leaving players before bowl games, before playoff berths. Like, I think it's a hell of a story for Brent Pry or James Franklin to walk into the living room of a respective prospect and say, hey, here are our values as a program. We love one another. We're loyal to one another. And what better example do you need than the loyalty that James Franklin has shown Brent Pry and the loyalty that Virginia Tech and Brent Pry have shown one another? I mean, it is a perfect encapsulation of a core value that every program should strive to have. And you've seen it blown up in some programs' faces by not exhibiting those core values. So I think that's a hell of a story to tell, and a true story as well. Lastly, I think this has a chance to be really damn cool. For as many people as want to say, this is going to fail, this is kind of silly and kind of weird, and I'm not even telling you you're wrong. The results of this will be bared out over the next couple of years, and we'll see what it looks like. But I like to believe, and I like to think of how freaking cool this can be. Let me paint a picture for you. If you're watching, close your eyes, unless you're driving. Imagine, James, it's 42 degrees. It's in Blacksburg, Virginia. We're playing against the Virginia Cavaliers. And the clock is winding down. It's 24-0. Virginia Tech is beating Virginia in Blacksburg to punch their ticket to the ACC championship. Pry just had a big-time sack on second down, strip sack. We're about to kneel it out. And you got Coach Pry and Coach Franklin embracing one another on the hash of the 45-yard line going towards the student section as two Virginia Tech players are pouring Gatorade over the two of them. I got to tell you, man, it's a little weird. It's a little different. But, man, if this goes well, what an amazing feel-good story. A couple of other things. Number one, I am so fired up, if you're watching on YouTube, that we get to keep and continue to use this photo. This is one of the best photos that has ever been taken in Virginia Tech history. Shout out. I don't know if Eric Shepard took this or Chris Jones took this, but one of them took it. I believe it was Chris. It might have been Eric, but unbelievable photo. I'm excited that we still get to use it. Number two, one of my gripes with Coach Pry, and I'll say this, I definitely had my gripes with Coach Pry, the head coach. I never questioned his loyalty to Virginia Tech. I never questioned how much he wanted to win here at Virginia Tech, and I never would have been put in a position to ask this, but I've never really had a question about his ability to run a good defense, right? I'm excited to see this guy, man. One of the gripes that I had was I need to see some emotion and some animation. If you type in Brent Pry, Penn State defensive coordinator, you see a whole lot of animation. You may consider that a silly thing, but I am excited to see animation Pry on this sideline, because this is a guy that knows how to get after it on the defensive side of the ball. He's going to have some damn good players to do so. And it's the redemption tour. Blacksburg, Virginia is home of the most interesting redemption tour in the country with Brent Pry and James Franklin. These two guys right here that have so much respect, so much love, and so much care for one another. I am so excited to watch this story unfold. This is special stuff, man. And I think there's going to be a lot of eyeballs on it. I tend to believe that it's going to work out. I have, again, a lot of trust in Coach Franklin. He has a lot to prove. And if he believes that Brent Pry is the best person to be the defense coordinator of this program, I can't wait for it. And I am going to be wishing that he absolutely crushes it every single Saturday. So I'm looking forward to it. Before we go, I have two letters from the lunch pail. One comes from David Callio. He says, how does the buyout work? I do not know definitively. I don't know if there was some sort of reduced buyout that was discussed after the contract. I do not know if there was some sort of offsetting language. I do not know if, hey, coach, if you accept this role as a defensive coordinator, let's work something out. But here's what I do know. When Coach Pry was originally let go, Steve Berkowitz put this tweet out. He said, Virginia Tech fires football coach Brent Pry per his contract, which had been set to run through 12/1/27. He is owed buyout of just over $6.8 million. He has no specific duty to mitigate, but VaTech would get offset from future income. So the way that I read that is if nothing changed in that contract and regarding his buyout, his new pay should offset what we owe him. It is yet to be announced what he's getting paid, but that is how I read that. If you're a lawyer and you know more, please throw it in the comments. Here's another one from Gerard Edens. Just a comment. If Pry had never taken the VT job and stayed at Penn State, we would all be clamoring for Franklin to bring him with him. I'm fine with it. Completely agree, Jared. Completely agree. Again, I think that he would be up for a defensive coordinator job elsewhere and would probably do a good job. So I think there's that perspective of it. I also want to weigh in on this. I think there's a sense, and it's fair because Virginia Tech as an athletic department has operated a specific way for a long time. And I think there are some people that look at this move and it's like, okay, this looks like a Virginia Tech move, right? Something didn't work out. Let's just find somewhere else for him to be. Costs, cut some costs, figure it out. I don't view it that way at all. I think if James Franklin takes the job at Arkansas, Florida State, Tulane, like if he goes anywhere else, he's probably calling Brent Pry and asking him to be his defensive coordinator. That's how I read it, right? Secondly, I don't view this as – it is interesting because this is in a similar vein of things that Virginia Tech has done in the past. My pushback to that, though, would be this is not us trying to fit a round peg in a square hole. Like Brent Pry as a defensive coordinator is a proven commodity, right? We have done things in the past where we have moved people around or elevated people to roles where they are not a proven commodity to be able to handle that type of job. And that's not what happened here. So I firmly believe and have zero other reason to believe that anybody is making this decision for James Franklin for financial reasons. Virginia Tech has not done anything since James Franklin has walked through the door to display that they were handcuffing or doing anything other than giving James Franklin the resources that he needs to be successful. Now we're going to need to continue to do that. And I imagine that he is going to continue to push for more. And ultimately, that's going to leave Virginia Tech in a better place as an athletic department and football program moving forward. That does it for this. I wish Coach Pry nothing but the best. I am excited for this. I think it's a very, very cool story of loyalty, of redemption, of family. And it's happening here at Virginia Tech. So I'm excited to watch this unfold. I'm excited to hear from him when we do. I don't know when that'll be. Very excited about the offensive coordinator hire. And very excited to see how we fill out the rest of the defensive staff the rest of the time away. So last ask for me, if you're still here, we're about 28 minutes in. Put down in the comments any topics you would like to hear from the Sons of Saturday six-pack. Probably going to do that on Sunday or Saturday. Going to be a new off-season deal. And also, if you've made it this far, please give me your thoughts on Brent Pry, the defensive coordinator for the Hokies. Again, please like, please subscribe. Again, this was our best month ever, was November. Really appreciate it. It's been a ton of fun. We have some awesome things cooking. Check us out on social. Check us out on YouTube. Check us out on Spotify. And again, appreciate the support. And we'll be talking to you guys again soon. Hey!